Welcome to the Financial Aid Overview presentation for the 2022-2023 financial aid year. My name is Ryan West, and I'm the Director of Financial Aid at Chemeketa Community College in Salem, Oregon. This presentation is intended to give an overview of the financial aid process with information about what is financial aid, the overall process, which applications students should use for financial aid, and what must be done to receive a financial aid offer. The information discussed in this presentation is general in nature and is not specific to community colleges or Chemeketa Community College only, but should apply to most any college or university that participates in the federal financial aid programs. We'll start with the basics. Financial aid is money to help pay for a student's educational expenses, including costs such as tuition and fees, books and supplies, room and board, and transportation and miscellaneous expenses. There are four major categories of financial aid: grants, scholarships, loans, and work study. Scholarships are generally the most well understood type of financial aid. This is free money awarded to a student based on talent, merit, skill, ability, or other criteria. Scholarship application processes vary and almost always require some form of direct application. This presentation is not going to dive deep into scholarship applications, but students should regularly and continuously search for scholarships during their senior year in high school and throughout college. Grants are free money typically awarded based on your family's financial situation. There are student loans and parent loans available to help pay for college as well. Student loans are repaid once the student leaves school. Parent loans are repaid while the student is in school typically, but repayment may be deferred. Work study is a type of financial aid that allows students to work, usually on campus or in a community service related position off campus, to earn money to help pay for their college costs. This slide shows the general process for financial aid. It starts with a student completing the appropriate financial aid application. We'll talk more about the application options in a moment. The student generally must have also applied for admission to any colleges they want to receive a financial aid offer from. It doesn't matter if you apply for admission or financial aid first, but both steps need to happen if you want a financial aid offer. In many cases, a school may need to collect additional information from you to complete the financial aid process. The most commonly requested information is copies of tax returns. It is important that students watch their mail, email, or check with the college financial aid office to see if the college needs more information before they can issue a financial aid offer. Once the college has all the information they need to determine the student's financial aid eligibility, they will put together a financial aid offer and notify the student. The student can then accept or decline each type of financial aid offered to them. The last step is the student will register for classes and then use financial aid to pay for their educational expenses. There are two financial aid applications in Oregon, but students will only complete one or the other as shown on the next slide. The free application for federal student aid, or FAFSA, is the one application students complete to be considered for grants, loans, and work study from both the federal and state government, as well as financial aid from many colleges. The Oregon Student Aid Application, or ORSA, is an application where students ineligible to complete the FAFSA may be considered for financial aid from the state of Oregon only. It is important to note that both of these applications are free, and you should never pay anyone for help with filing them. They are both government-based applications, and therefore their websites end in .gov. There are other websites out there that claim to somehow help with your financial aid application for a fee. There is no need to pay for that. It is a waste of money. This slide shows which application for financial aid a student should use. If the student is a U.S. citizen or permanent resident of the U.S., then the FAFSA is the application to use. There are other less common categories where eligible non-citizens of the U.S. may qualify for financial aid. Visit studentaid.gov to help determine your eligibility. If the student is a resident of Oregon but not a U.S. citizen or permanent resident, then the student can complete the ORSA to potentially be considered for financial aid from the state of Oregon. It is important to note that you only file one of these applications, not both. If you file both of them, it will slow down your financial aid process as schools in the state try to untangle your eligibility. If you're still unclear about which application you should file, review the FAFSA or ORSA websites, contact your college and career office at high school to ask for help, or contact your local college's financial aid office for advice. Regardless of which application you file, you must remember these are annual processes and you want to file or renew your application every year on October 1 or as soon as possible afterwards. Most financial aid is awarded based on financial need. However, I'm a firm believer that everyone should apply for financial aid every year, even higher income households. Some scholarship programs require that a student apply for financial aid just to be considered, even if financial need isn't a component. Also, if there is a sudden change in family income due to job loss, divorce, or death, there is so much more a financial aid office may be able to do if you've already filed a FAFSA if those unfortunate circumstances occur. Financial aid funds are limited, so they go to the qualified students who applied the earliest, which is why it is critical that students file as soon as possible after October 1 each year. Also, colleges tend to work financial aid applications in the order they were received, so the students who apply first will receive their financial aid packages the earliest. I wanted to include some information here about sticker shock. College is expensive. However, until you apply for financial aid and see how much grant and scholarship money you get from a college, it is nearly impossible to tell how much you will be expected to pay. While college cost is a reasonable factor to consider when making a final decision about college, I don't think it is wise to disqualify schools that you deem too expensive until you see what sort of financial aid offer they can make you. Once you have your financial aid offers from all the schools you're seriously considering, that is when you can start factoring in the cost of college in your decision making. The FAFSA and ORSA both calculate a number called the Expected Family Contribution, or EFC. You may hear a lot about this. It really isn't an accurate picture of what you can or will pay for college, but is simply a tool used by financial aid administrators to determine the types and amounts of financial aid that you qualify for. The FAFSA also helps determine eligibility for federal financial aid by confirming things such as citizenship, that you're using the correct social security number, etc. The timing of financial aid offers varies pretty widely, but if you file the FAFSA or ORSA early, have applied for admission to the college, completed any outstanding financial aid requirements with the college, then you should receive a financial aid offer. Some offers may come as early as December for private institutions that make early admission offers, but most typically for public institutions, as well as many private institutions, are financial aid offers rolling out in the spring. Here are some items that you may want to gather before starting your FAFSA. It is critical that you know the student's social security number and enter it correctly into the form. If you are an eligible non-citizen, you'll need your alien registration number. If parents have social security numbers, you'll need those too. However, parents do not need to have a social security number in order for students to qualify for financial aid, so don't panic if your parents don't have a social security number. A copy of your 2020 federal income tax return and records of any untaxed income, such as child support, as well as your bank and investment records would be helpful. Similarly, if you're filing the ORSA, you'll want your social security number if you have one, but it is not required for a student to have a social security number to complete the ORSA. Otherwise, you'll want the same financial records that I just described, as the ORSA and FAFSA ask the same exact questions. The FAFSA and ORSA are split into multiple sections covering student demographics, student financial information, student dependency status, parent financial information and household size, colleges to receive your information, and your signature and submission of the FAFSA or ORSA. In the next few slides, we'll discuss some of the items that can confuse students and families as they complete the application. The U.S. Congress creates the laws about what information has to be considered for federal financial aid. There is a specific definition of independent or dependent student for financial aid purposes. Generally, parental income, asset, and household information will be on the FAFSA or ORSA for any student under the age of 24. It is important to understand that by filing the FAFSA or ORSA, parents are not responsible for any decisions the student makes with their financial aid. You are not endorsing or co-signing anything by completing the FAFSA or ORSA, but your information is required to determine what types and amounts of financial aid your student is eligible to receive. If a parent refuses to complete the FAFSA or ORSA or provide the documentation necessary for a student to complete their financial aid file, the student is ineligible for financial aid. There are a series of questions on the FAFSA and ORSA that the student will answer to determine if they are a dependent or independent student for financial aid purposes. Those criteria include if the student will be 24 or older before the end of the financial aid year, if the student is married or in a master's degree or doctoral program, if the student is currently on active duty in the U.S. Armed Forces or is a veteran of the Armed Forces. For financial aid purposes, the active duty must be for something other than training. If the student has a child or other legal dependent for whom the student provides 50% or more of their financial support. A student could also be considered independent if they have been determined to be a homeless youth by the school district under the McKinney-Vento Act, or if the student is residing in a homeless shelter or youth basic shelter. There are unique circumstances where it is impossible or unsafe for a student to obtain information from their parents. Financial aid administrators have authority in the law to collect documentation from an otherwise dependent student and consider them independent for financial aid purposes. This is almost always done for circumstances such as abuse, neglect, or abandonment, or if parents are incarcerated or their location is unknown. It is important to understand this process for being considered independent is only for extraordinary circumstances. It has nothing to do with the student wanting to apply on their own or pay their own way. It does not matter if the parent does not claim the student as a tax deduction, or if the parent does not want to provide information, nor does it matter if the student lives at home. If unique circumstances exist, then the student needs to contact the financial aid office at the school where they wish to attend for next steps. Typically, the college will obtain a statement from the student about the circumstances, as well as documentation from third parties in order to evaluate the circumstances. Each school must make their own decision, so if you're looking at multiple schools, you'll need to contact each of them to find out the process. It is also important to understand who is considered a parent for the purposes of the FAFSA and ORSA. Parents for the FAFSA and ORSA are your legal parents, either biological or adoptive parents. Grandparents, foster parents, legal guardians, widowed step-parents, aunts, uncles, and siblings are not considered parents on the FAFSA or ORSA unless they have legally adopted you. If you are living with someone other than your biological or adoptive parent because that parent is unable to care for you, you should probably contact your financial aid office for advice. If your parents are married to each other or are unmarried but live together, you'll answer questions about both parents. If your parent was never married and does not live with your other legal parent, or your parent is widowed and not remarried, answer the questions about your one parent. If your parents are divorced or separated, answer the questions about the parent you lived with more during the past 12 months. If you did not live with one parent more than the other, answer the questions about the parent who provided you more financial support during the past 12 months, or most recent year you actually received financial support from a parent. If that parent is remarried as of the day you complete the FAFSA or ORSA, answer questions about that parent and your step-parent. There are two sections of the FAFSA and ORSA about financial information. One section is for students and one section is for parents. Not all students see all questions, so don't panic if I reference a question in this presentation and you do not see it. The web version and app-based FAFSA application is equipped with skip logic, so it will skip questions it does not need to determine your financial aid eligibility. Be sure that you are clearly answering questions about the student in the student section and parents in the parent section. You will use your 2020 earnings and tax information when completing the 2022-2023 FAFSA or ORSA. You must use your 2020 tax data when answering all questions. If your income has changed significantly since 2020, you fill out the FAFSA or ORSA completely, and then you should contact your financial aid office to ask about how to report that you've had a change in income. You cannot report these changes yourself. A financial aid administrator must review and document the circumstances and make any related changes to the FAFSA. If you filed 2020 federal taxes and the FAFSA asks if you wish to use the IRS data retrieval tool to help fill in your FAFSA, do it. This tool does not work for everyone, but if it is an option and works for you, it will speed up your FAFSA filing experience and reduce the chance that you have to provide additional documentation to your school later on. If you are not asked to use the IRS data retrieval tool, or you try and cannot successfully get it to work, don't worry. Just type your answers to all the questions asked and keep moving on with your application. Not everyone will be asked questions about your assets, but if you are, there is likely to again be a student asset section and a parent asset section. Most of the time, parents may be asked a screening question such as, do your total assets exceed X amount of dollars? When thinking about the question, read the directions carefully. The assets that the FAFSA and ORSA consider are cash, savings, and checking accounts, the net worth of investments including real estate, and the value of some businesses or investment farms. However, there are important asset exclusions on the FAFSA and ORSA. You never include the value of the home you live in. You also never include the value of retirement accounts such as a pension, IRA, 401k, or other qualified plans. Lastly, only report the value of a business you own if it has more than 100 full-time employees. For most Americans, our major assets are held in retirement accounts or in home equity in the home we live in. Neither of these types of assets are counted for this purpose. Read the help text carefully when answering these questions. Pay close attention to the directions when you come to the household size questions. These definitions are specific and may not only be the people who live in your home. For dependent students, most students under the age of 24, you'll always count the student in the household, the parents whose information is included on the FAFSA or ORSA, other siblings in the home, and any other people living in the home for whom the parents provide more than half of their support and will continue to do so for the next school year. The financial and household sections of the FAFSA and ORSA are where most of the questions are, and it can make students and parents uneasy. Utilize the help text and help functions in the applications if you get confused. In these sections, you'll be able to come back after submitting the application and correct any errors that you realize have been made. If you have questions, contact your high school, college, and career office or your financial aid office. This is my 19th year as a financial aid administrator in Oregon, and I wanted to throw in a couple of my best tips that I tell friends or family who ask for advice. Complete your FAFSA or ORSA every year no later than October 15th. The application launches on October 1 each year. As long as you get this step done in the first 2 weeks each year, I think you'll be considered for all the aid that you can receive. I would recommend listing your local community college on your FAFSA or ORSA and encourage you to also apply for the Oregon Promise program. This is what was created as Oregon's free community college tuition program. It really isn't free, that isn't a very good description of it, but it is a grant program that covers a huge chunk of community college tuition. Even if you don't think you plan to go to community college, I highly recommend doing this as an insurance policy. The past couple of years have shown us how quickly our lives can be changed and we can be in circumstances we never imagined. Complete your financial aid file at every college you are considering so you can make an informed decision about where you go to college. Lastly, ask questions when you're unsure of what to do or do not understand something. The college financial aid process is unique and new to many of you. Ask for clarification or help. Your situation may not be the same as your friend, so it is better to ask questions of your college financial aid office directly rather than assume something to be true because it applied to someone else. Lastly, there are great people and resources available to help with your questions. Your high school, college, and career or guidance office are great resources, as is the financial aid offices where you are thinking of attending. Both the FAFSA and ORSA websites and phone numbers are available for specific questions as well. Here is a list of the Salem-Keizer School District college and career coaches by high school. Please contact your college and career coach with any questions about your next steps. Thanks so much for watching this presentation. I hope it was a helpful overview. Put on your calendars a date in early October to complete the FAFSA and ORSA and have a great year. Thank you.